Welcome to the Whole Church Podcast.
Your favorite church unity podcast.
Probably.
If you want to hear from pastors,
Professors.
and everything in between,
Right, sure.
and, the occasional train talk.
Right, yeah. Have we got the podcast for you?
Should we just start?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys for listening. Your host, Joshua Knoll, and this is your co-host, Tiberius Wan.
Yeah, TJ.
And we got a couple of guests today. We have Miss Marie Proctor, or you're Sam, she's Ruth.
I'm Sam, she's Ruth.
Sam and Ruth,
Right.
and Delores Matthews is Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll talk about that name in a second.
Okay.
Here. I'm excited to get into that. That'll be fun. We didn't want to talk about. We wanted to read one of the comments left on Facebook by your mom. I just like being able to say your mom is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But she said she commented on the podcast we did with Dr. Link and Dr. Beck. Just said it was very informative and thought-provoking. So that was good. We always want to try and read a comment or something just so we can encourage people to comment more so we can read them up. We like feedback, like real feedback. Had some feedback that our outro music was a little too loud for you to hear, people, so I'm going to be working on that. And also wanted to say we've been about the same amount of listeners for a while, so we want to encourage everyone to share on your own social media because that helps different groups of people. I can only reach the same group of people on my social media, and you probably have friends that aren't my friends if you're listening.
Probably.
Most likely.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah. It'd be weird if everybody had the exact same amount of friends and they were all the same people.
Right.
That sounds like a what's it called? Black Mirror's Edge or Black Mirror?
Black Mirror?
Yeah.
That's
sounds like
something
one
that would happen in
episode,
Black Mirror.
Yeah. But
Or
yeah.
like just a closed community.
Yeah. Also follow us on our Patreon. You can support us there.
Please, we need money.
No, we travel a lot. We need more equipment, all that stuff. What's other things? He wants a new notebook.
Well, we don't need a new.
We definitely need a new mic. Our mic is terrible. This
Yeah.
mic is nice. We're in a pastor of a giant church's studio. Would you call this your studio?
Office.
Office.
Yeah.
Office/studio/basketball arena.
Right, it's a lot bigger
Yeah,
than
that's
our
about right.
office.
They have one of the little basketball with hoops over here. That just sounds fun. It's a lot bigger because we live in a tiny apartment in Charlotte. Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, but yeah, you can support us there, help us do some of that, and visit some. We have some cool guests lined up, so we need to travel for that.
Right.
Yeah. Did you have anything else?
No.
Are we gonna do our icebreaker question?
We're gonna do the icebreaker question.
So we
now.
do a silly question at the beginning of ours, just kind of like break the ice and get everybody involved and be goofy. Cause
Well, first we would like you to
be
introduce
goofy.
yourselves.
I thought we'd do that. That makes more sense.
Yeah. Well,
I am Sam, or AKA Marie Proctor, and I am Ruth. Delores Matthews.
You want to go ahead and tell us about those names, or who you are, so they don't just have names.
Yes, I am Sam she is Ruth. She is my Ruth because she is my best friend, my ultimate best friend, and just coming off the heels of biblical Ruth and Naomi, and how Ruth followed Naomi just everywhere, and I just loved her, and so she is my Ruth.
And she is Sam to me. If you've ever seen Lord of the Rings, Frodo had a friend, Sam, that would not leave him and would even put himself in dangerous situations just to be with him. So,
If you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, we'll all pray that you meet Jesus. Yeah. So y'all are both head pastors of different churches.
yes, I pastor in Blythewood.
I pastor in Lancaster, co-pastor with someone else.
Both of those are South Carolina. For anyone
Yeah.
who happens to not be in South Carolina listening,
we have a few.
Yeah, Kentucky. We got a lot of people in Georgia. I don't know who they are. Shout out to Georgia people.
True fans.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we're gonna start with our icebreaker question now.
Our
Do I have
icebreaker
permission?
question. You go ahead.
Okay. Thank
Need
you.
to read it?
Yeah, I'm excited. No, I remember what it was.
Okay.
So we'll answer first. Y'all have some time to think about it. The question today is: if someone had you as in their contact in their phone, what would be the best ringtone for them to have for you? Like if I was to call you, it would be the best ringtone you could have for me calling you, which I still think it's the Jack Sparrow theme is what I'm going to go with. Because,
That's a
love
good answer.
Pirates of the Caribbean, and also I have that kind of goofiness of Jack Sparrow where it's like he doesn't seem like I'm playing anything, so then sometimes you wonder, did he plan it? Because it doesn't seem like he did, but that worked out too well for him not to have.
All right.
That's like a major character trait.
All right. So, okay.
Yeah. What about you, Tiberius?
This is we thought about this question on the way here, and I didn't think about it at all for some reason.
This
But,
started because I wanted to put his ringtone in my phone is "Going to Mars" from Judah and the Lion because he wants to go to Mars.
I do eventually.
Yeah.
That's the end goal. But
that's his end goal.
I think I might go with the Rattling Bog. Like for someone's ringtone, for me, the Rattling Bog really
such a good song.
emphasizes what I would like people to think of me.
Can you
as.
do a line from it real quick?
Oh, I can do the first line.
No, don't do the first line.
I'm not gonna do the last line.
Start at the leaf.
If you
Start
don't,
at leaf.
No, I'm not gonna. But if you don't know what the Rattling Bog is, it's like Father Abraham, but for Irish people.
Yeah, just
and it's
keeps
extremely
every
long,
line.
and it just gets everyone into the spirit of camaraderie and.
My favorite version
Once it
gets down to
starts.
subatomic particles.
Yeah, it's subatomic particle on the speck on the
Yeah.
eye on the flea on the feather on the chick on the wing on the bird. No, wing
Sing
in
it.
wing. Nope. I gotta listen to it, but
Oh, the
That's-
Rattling Bog.
yeah.
Down in the valley.
that's what I would
Look it
choose
up,
for my own ringtone.
since he won't sing it.
Yeah, listen to it on
Breaks
your
my
own
heart.
time.
Okay. So Sam,
I feel extremely set up. Don't you? Like they said, they got to think about it on the way
On the
up
way
here.
up here.
Oh, but
This
I
is
this
so
is our
we
get,
get,
favorite
like,
thing to do.
5 seconds.
But I
This
didn't.
is
I
yeah.
We did
refrained.
it to my old professors with what was the question that
Least
time?
favorite animal.
Yeah, that was fun.
That
Can we
would've
go
been
with
easier.
that?
Yeah.
No, you can't. You're not allowed to answer that question.
No.
You can
Man,
after.
I don't even know who sings this song, but I know you. You ask Sam first. Go Sam.
All I can think about is I've always wanted to stand on the boat on the Titanic in that song that comes on too. So there you go. I'll be the
awful.
Titanic girl.
It's awful.
I can't imagine
It's like what have I always wanted to do? Just stand there with the wind just in my hair.
Okay. I don't know who
I'd always
sings
answer the
this.
phone crying when Marie calls.
Yeah.
Hi, Marie. How's it going, Sam?
I don't think I'd ever answer the phone. I think I'd just get sad and then like, why did that
I
song
can't,
play?
Can't
she
bring
called
myself
me.
to answer.
That's a good choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Proud of you.
All right, Ruth. Finale.
Okay, mine would. I don't know who sings this, and I'm not really sure that I know all of it. So if y'all look it up, don't. Yeah.
Probably Adele.
Don't judge me.
Hello.
No, not really Adele. I'm thinking, is it George Strait that sings "I'm not here for a long time. I'm just here for a good time."
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
That's
That's
a really
me.
fun ringtone.
Hey, yeah.
So
That's
when-
me. Yeah.
When Sam calls, I should cry. When Ruth calls, I should have a party.
Yeah,
There you
get
go.
ready.
Huh.
Yeah, it's about to go down.
Very conflicted.
It's not. I don't think that's the message they were trying to convey.
All right. So we have you guys on because last week, Becky Walker, did you want to say something about last week's podcast?
Last week's podcast, our icebreaker question was favorite cloud. I think that's the most important thing we can get out.
Yeah.
No, we had the women's ministry leader from Anderson University on, and we asked her how she feels about female head pastors in the church, and she said she didn't agree with it. She said she wasn't, a big fan of female head pastors.
Yeah. Although she was very supportive of it.
Yeah, she
just
was very
wasn't-
supportive. She just didn't believe it was right.
Yeah, I
Almost
remember
like-
she did talk about how a lot of times, it comes down to the fruit of the spirit, and you'll see there'll be women pastors who do have it and men who maybe don't. But she just personally wasn't comfortable with it.
Right.
It was very respectful, but she had a different perspective on it than I'm sure you guys have, which we're just really excited to see both sides of that.
Yeah. When we got the chance to interview 2 female head pastors, I'm like, wow, that's
The
literally
very next
perfect.
week, yes, we're really excited about that.
So
Yeah.
that's a big part about why, I want to say why that podcast happened. I think that one happened so this one could happen.
Yeah, it was just a setup.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was I really liked her and respected her.
Go check it out.
Yeah,
Um,
everybody should listen to last week's episode. Maybe before this one. Maybe.
Oh, it would help.
It'd be, it's a good setup. Okay, so with that, we want to see the perspective of people who are obviously for women pastors, since both are some. And particularly, we find this debate interesting in our time because it's a lot of where the world culture is very feministic and very maybe not feministic, but very pro everybody's
Progressive.
liberty. Yeah,
Very progressive.
Or almost liberal.
Very all
Whereas the church likes to be as conservative as possible and almost just disagree with everything the culture says, just to disagree with it sometimes. And of course, we don't want to be on either side just because we don't want to be conservative for the sake of being conservative, and we don't want to be progressive because that sounds nice, like a nice way of putting it. We don't want to be on either side just to be on the side. It's tribalism. We talked about that on the podcast before. We want to be because we want to know the truth. We want to know what the Bible says, and we want to be on the side of that. Because ultimately, just like we said in the first episode of this podcast, is the closer we all get to Jesus, the closer we are united. You know, we're all like Jesus. We'll find each other in the same place. So looking for some truth in that, we had some questions for you guys that Tiberius is going to start, because I can't.
I don't want to start.
I can't read your handwriting.
But well, we did want to. That's fair. We wanted to ask how you decided to become head pastors. Like, what moment in your life made you realize that's what you wanted to do, or if it just kind of happened, accidentally.
How do you accidentally become a pastor?
I'm
I'll
not
let
sure.
you go first.
I might do it one day. I'll let you know.
First pastor on Mars.
Thumb wrestle over
I
it.
surrender to you.
Flip a coin.
Thumb wrestle.
Can we just go with
Nope.
Well, I will tell you this. I did not grow up thinking I would ever be a pastor, not because of any kind of view of women in ministry or anything like that, but just because it wasn't anything that interests me. I was more about like building and that kind of stuff. It wasn't pastoral ministries until a transition happened, until the church that I'm at now was in need of a pastor. And so prior to that, I did get my license in ministry, just thinking it would open doors, whether it was women's ministry, whatever it was. And so when it happened for me to become a pastor, I know that it was orchestrated by the Lord. In fact, one day I had a funeral at a gravesite, and it was just a small funeral with a lot of people who did not believe in female pastors. And I think that was my first encounter with people who did not think that females should be in a pastoral role.
Very welcoming environment.
Yeah, and they were very nice, but I would have not known that until I went to the car, and a couple took me to the side and was like, "Hey, you did a really good job. I just want you to know you did a really good job. But let me ask you this: we've always had the view that pastors are male, not female." And I said, "Well, I'm called by the Lord, not man. And so for me to be in that role as pastor, it was not something that I had chosen. It was something that I just answered the call to. And I don't.
You just saw a role and you filled it.
Right. Yeah.
You weren't actively seeking it. It was kind of like you were standing next to a door and it opened.
It opened.
Like, oh, well, I might as well.
Right.
Well, that's
Called
like
my name.
my brother Baker always told me when making some decisions, he talked about a lot of people are almost too spiritually inclined, or they want to hear a divine revelation. He's like, and his go-to is David and Goliath. He said David didn't stop and pray or get an answer from God. He saw a giant and he did God's work because it was there to do. So I was like, yeah, so I think that's
right.
The position you filled in. That's
right.
Awesome.
Right. So it's for me to have to defend that position or anything. I think it's you take it up with him. I'm just doing my job.
Did what was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was fine. Yeah, I didn't grow up thinking I would ever be a pastor.
Right.
Yeah.
That happens a lot where people don't really think. They think what they're going to be, and it just never happens. It's like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be the president. Like, that'd be cool if that happened, but
Also,
might not be what you're called to do.
God kind of prefers the humble. People who are like, oh, I want to be a pastor one day. It's
I'm
almost
humble.
like God just kind of
Oh, yeah?
isn't as on board with that. It's like, oh, really? Are you?
So
We'll
am
see.
I.
Man.
Oh, my, I guess, we believe in calling and know that, God has purpose. But I think he led me to my purpose through problems. Like I saw a problem. And whereas I guess you would say an opportunity, I saw a problem that needed to be solved. And so I started out actually in youth ministry before becoming a lead pastor, and youth pastored for many, many years. And it was out a result of my transformation and what God had, I guess, healed me from through childhood. And so quite naturally, my heart went out to young people and kids. And so that was where my start was. And it just began to mature into, not necessarily like this was the next step, because like Sam, I didn't pursue this particular position. And we can even say now, we can take it or leave it. It's not anything. We're still going to do the work of the Lord. He just, for whatever reason, has placed us in this place of, we see it as influence. For us, leadership is all about influence. Pastoring is all about influencing through leveraging love for people and watching God do his work. So
That sounds like just a really quotable thing.
Yeah.
Pastoring is all about influence. Was it
Oh.
leveraging love? You said influencing by leveraging love. I don't know. I'm not good at quotes. That was good though.
Okay.
I mean, I know it's interesting to me because without directly being involved, I think you guys were both kind of involved with my ciphering through the scriptures because I didn't know there was anything at all about women being head pastors really until I went to a Baptist college, Charleston Southern University. So when I first kind of heard that debate at all, which I had a great professor, Dr. Beck, who was episode 11. He was great.
Smart fellow.
He refused to tell us his stance on it at all, and he just set up someone. He just he started the argument just so someone would be on that side. Be like, okay, now I'm going to set up the other side and just watch you all argue. It's a great way to do theology. It was a lot of fun. It was a really fun class. But I never even realized it was an issue. And in that, of course, he introduced us to 1 Timothy chapter 2. We're going to talk about some about that. And that's my first thought was, I know two people who in my head, it was a really natural progression. Marie was my babysitter once upon a time, and I've known her when she was a children's pastor, and so on and so on. I was like, it was a really natural progression. Yeah. Dolores, I've known from camp for years and years and years. They've always been spiritual leaders. Why does it matter if it says pastor or not? It's just what they are.
That's kind of how it was for me. I didn't know that was an issue until I went to North Greenville, which is a Baptist college, and
it's like Charleston Southern Sister School.
What do you mean women can't be pastors?
Right.
Yeah, that's dumb. I know.
That's dumb.
And it's still kind of I wouldn't say a shock to us that we are still having to talk about this in 2019. But the reality is, at my age, my mom, when she would have been raising kids, would have needed to get my dad's permission to even have a credit card. Like he would have had to co-sign for her. So when we think about the progression as women, and obviously you guys are interested in what it means to be a woman and pastor, but when we talk about the feminist movement, sometimes that just feels so negative. Like, oh gosh, are they burning their bras and demanding whatever? And
I know TJ hated the female part of Avengers Endgame.
It was dumb.
I haven't seen it yet. Don't say that.
Hold
on, I'm trying to catch up on all that.
It wasn't set up. They just kind of had a random scene where they were like, "Yeah, girl power," and it was like, was that necessary? I mean, it wasn't. It wasn't a bad thing. It was just kind of why was that there?
It was a poorly put together thing, but that's all we're going to talk about.
And I don't know that that's something that we set out to throw around our weight, or we don't believe what you believe, and we believe that we're all created equal, or I don't know that we put much emphasis on it. Had you guys not asked us to do this, I don't know that we would have had to be aware of, there are people out there that still disagree with. Yeah. We get it occasionally where someone will say, hey, my husband won't come to your church because, there's a female pastor. But those are very few.
Really uncomfortable.
And I didn't hear anything like that until I became a pastor. And then I began to hear things. And we would have conversations prior to that. And she would just kind of, I guess the area she's from, she would have more of the, derogatory comments toward, females in ministry and stuff. And I didn't really have that. Now, once I became a pastor, I could look back and see where there were some pretty dominant, male leadership roles where there was like some threads of, I think what Becky said last week, the complementarianism, view.
Oh, wow, y'all listened.
Yeah, I did. She did a great job too. And I think she's probably.
We love you guys.
What did she say that she's over the ladies, the women at Anderson University, and 70% are women?
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, she's more of a leader there, because if she is over 70% of the, enrollment there, she's
70% in charge.
Exactly. So and also I heard too through her that there were positions that she wanted that she couldn't, and so there was some suffering that
was
went.
Some really interesting.
Yeah.
To me.
So I'd definitely vote for Becky.
Everybody, Becky 2020. That's actually the end goal of our podcast.
That's it. Yeah.
Surprise! We're uniting.
But she did a good job too. Just just bringing that to the table.
I thought she was just so respectful, and it still felt like she was very much female power, but also just on this one issue saw differently.
Yeah,
it was kind of cool.
Yeah,
which we read it last week. I'm going to read it again because this is kind of where the argument centers around scripturally. So it's 1 Timothy chapter 2, starting in verse 9, of course, New American Standard Bible, because it's the best. I'm going to keep saying that till someone emails me and argues, because I just really want to have this conversation with somebody, because I just think it's a fun conversation. I get a lot into biblical language and that kind of stuff. But anyway, it says, likewise, this is Paul speaking, I want women to adorn themselves with proper clothing, modestly and discreetly, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly garments, but rather by means of good works, as is proper for women, making a claim to godliness. A woman must quietly receive instruction with entire submissiveness, but I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, and that's where it kind of centers around, but to remain quiet. For it was Adam who was first created, and then Eve, and it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. But women will be preserved through the bearing of children if they continue in faith and love and sanctity with self-restraint. I got to be honest also with that scripture. I always thought that whole guys being like, oh, it was women's fault. I just thought that was a funny thing guys did. I didn't think that was in the Bible. I was like, oh, that's weird. Just very odd scripture for me personally. Weird joke, guys. Yeah. So how do y'all deal with this scripture?
Well, I think I'll just set you up to unpack it. I think what we've done with that is set the model for the church of what it looks like to be a pastor. And is that what really Paul is saying? Because that's the problem. The problem is it's like we are using that particular passage to say this is what it looks like to have women in leadership, or this is the pastoral model for placing people as a lead pastor, right? That's the question today. How can we say that we are lead pastors and yet you just read that particular.
Paul says you can't teach me anything.
Right.
Obviously isn't true.
Right. Because there's other places too where Paul says, there's neither Greek nor Gentiles, male nor female, that we're all equal. And so, but what about this? And what about us? And was Paul setting up the model of the church?
Right. And so, Paul, do you want us to serve or do you want us to sit down? I mean, which one? Do you want us to shut up or do you want us to speak up? And so I think we have to look at Paul too. Paul, prior to conversion, was what we say a bull in a china shop. He went in just persecuting the church. And so we naturally take that same personality into the church thinking that he's going to set the church straight.
And you just said that. You said naturally. But should we be doing that? It's almost like we painted this picture of Paul, pre-Paul.
Right.
Angry, mad, killing Christians. And then we still paint this picture of angry, mad, still killing authority or
setting people straight in the church.
Yeah. When people have brought that verse to us, I think it's never with gentleness. It's never with, we care about you being out of the will of the Lord. It's never that.
Right.
It's always aggressive. And it's always, Paul said this. And as we were just kind of unpacking this for this episode, we were thinking, wow, people have really tried to pit us against Paul.
Right. So what was his goal? His goal was open that passage up again and look at the first chapter and go to verse 5. So we have to look back to see what Paul was trying to accomplish here.
Again, this is the best version.
Okay.
It says, but the goal of our instruction is love from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith.
Okay. So right there, Paul was coming to them at love. He was pulling them close and saying, let's talk. I think Paul went into, there's so many schools of thought of what, Paul was doing here. When I look and when I think about women in ministry, and this is the passage that is used all the time, but if you look in a different, maybe Corinthians or somewhere, it talks about Paul saying to women, when you prophesy, prophesy with your head, either covered or uncovered, something like that. And so how is he giving women the authority to prophesy when he's having them to be silent and not teach? So I guess we could go a variety of ways here, but I just think about the culture that they were in, the Greco-Roman culture, and there was a lot of Gentiles that came in that were doing a lot of there was I think that was just kind of like the hub of a lot of different cultures. And so there had to be something set there. Paul always tried to leverage love and a clear conscience. And so I know as a pastor, if you've ever pastored, you know that you can't just go in the church and change the culture overnight. It takes, what have we seen, like at least 3 years to begin to change the culture of the church. And so when Paul's given Timothy these instructions, the end result wasn't to always have these women not in these roles. I think that the culture was beginning to change, and obviously here in the Western church, we still kind of pull these things out. But I go back to the text. If you read later in Timothy, it talks about slavery. Well, we know slavery's wrong and it's been abolished here, but there's other things that people want to fixate on just because it promotes power. And I think sometimes people want to fixate on certain issues because it makes them more powerful, especially if they can suppress women and suppress certain topics that will cause them to be, more powerful. So I don't know. I just, I think we could go, a lot of different ways there, but I don't think Paul was trying to hand down a bunch of rules like he did in his prior conversion. I think he was going into saying these meetings are out of control. This is what's happening when we have these meetings, because if you go on past verse 5, it will talk about the meetings. They were still trying to hold to the law of Moses. And so those meetings were wild and out of control. And so he had at least put something there. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of, our take right now. There's, several other scriptures. If you look at Paul, when Paul goes back to male and female, and even in Genesis, he references Adam and Eve. And it's very powerful. I'm serious. When I read that again, it's like, okay, I don't even know what to do with that text. It's almost sickening when you read it, and it's like, oh, what do you do with that until you begin to try to unpack it.
Like in today's world, that just sounds so bad.
Yeah, it does. And I was reading a book. It's called Paul and Gender, I believe, and there's a part in there where they talk about, if we think this is pretty harsh toward women, imagine what Paul was saying toward the men. And so when he gives the men instruction of how to care for the church, he tells them to nurture them. What does he say? That he nurtured the flock, the congregation, like he had to give them milk because they weren't ready for solid food. They weren't ready for the meat because they were new believers and they were immature, right? So back then, we think now, we'll just put milk in a bottle and give it to the baby. We're cool. No, but back then they didn't have bottles, right? So he is telling this male pastor to nurture this flock like a mother does her children. So there is feminine qualities that these pastors are having to take on that wasn't very acceptable in that culture because it was male dominance. And so imagine a man having to take on the image of a mom and literally breastfeeding the church. So to me, when I think about that, I am like, wow, that's probably more a dig on a man than a woman. But when you think about it in both contexts, I really truly believe that Paul was trying to not pit one against the other, but that he was certainly trying to care for the church as a whole.
He just corrected everybody.
Say what?
Yeah, it's like
He corrected everybody.
I may not think I can learn from them, but you guys were all just stupid.
Yeah. Paul, what I love about God redeemed your personality, and like Paul was very harsh in a bad, negative way beforehand, but God redeemed the personality. Like you still see a lot of harshness from Paul, but it's like in love. Like now it's correcting and building people up as opposed to tearing people down. Mm-hmm. And it's just really interesting. Like in 1 Corinthians 15, he's correcting the church there, and in his correction he reads, "Brethren, don't be children in your thinking, yet in evil be infants." Like he's just straight up was like, hey, some of what you're doing is straight up childish. Be only childish in how evil you are.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that's pretty harsh. He just was like, hey, what you're doing is childish. Like, oh, all right, Paul.
Yeah.
It's a letter. I can't
bringing
message
it
you
around.
back. What? Don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and two, he uses a lot of imagery there too. When you think of an athlete, back then it was male athletes, and so he's telling people, but what do? We adopt that for male and female. to say run the race, do the work of an athlete, prepare yourself, and all of this. But yet naturally back then it was definitely masculine. Look at the whole armor
of God. Yeah.
Who wore that? Men.
Men.
So why do we try to put that on women?
Well, I think too that we're missing the context in which it was said. Is this Paul setting up the model for the church? We got to get back to that. Was Paul saying this is the model of the church? Women are never supposed to, or was this in the context of what was happening in that society at that time? That's what Sam is saying. Was this part of the culture? Was it? It's believed that the pagan temple. Had prostitutes and they were the hub of the city. And if you were employed, they ran the city. And so Paul comes in and he's trying to bring about, I don't even necessarily know that, this harsh correction or whatever, but setting this up so that
we also have guest dog. What's dog's name?
Willow.
Willow?
Oh.
Does Willow know how to speak?
She thinks so. She'll
That'd be
howl
great.
or
I would have her speak if she would. Sorry.
No, quite all right.
I'll say this. I'm ADHD, and our audience is very used to it.
Listen, I'm used to Willow too, just kind of barging in, doing her thing. She thinks she's human, but and I think it's back to what is the context to which Paul is writing this? What was the culture? What was the society? And what kind of order was he trying to bring to those people? We have to also understand this. There was false teaching going on. So he was trying to address that. Not necessarily, women, listen, they were the ones who were bringing in some of the false teaching that was coming from, that was in the culture at that time. And so he was making them aware. So what was Paul really addressing? Is this the model that the church should be following? Because throughout Scripture, look at Jesus. When we go back to Jesus, who was the first evangelist?
Man, this got brought up 2 weeks in a row. This is crazy.
You know what I mean? Who were the first evangelists? Women. How can we deny Jesus's love for all of humanity? He came to put us all on the same playing field. We all have no skin in the game. It's even Stephen. When the first people to announce that he has risen are females.
Yeah.
So how do you wrestle with that? How do you wrestle with the scriptures? Yeah. And I think for us, and I know you want to dive into the unity, and we know how we have managed to still love and all of that. But I think it's important for us to take the whole Bible and also understand the context to which these passages were written. That's important. And it's also important to understand, what Jesus said and did for women. The lady at the well, all that stuff. He should have never been talking to her.
Yeah.
I
think, and she went and told the whole city, evangelized.
That was great.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I also was taught this at Charleston Southern. They talk about hermeneutical principles, and one of the major things that they like to use is learning what type of literature everything is. Mm-hmm. And if it's a letter, you have to understand that was from one specific person written to one specific group. So I think that's what you were saying, right? It was a specific letter, not necessarily instructions for the whole church.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I also get to throw in the whole church. See, I like when I get to say
church.
that. Yeah.
Bars.
Yeah.
Yeah, trademark. It's not trademark.
It's not.
Okay, sorry. And you were getting ready to say something? Did I put you on the spot?
No.
Willow got her.
That happens.
Okay. Well, but yeah, so I think that is important that we look at what was it written for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I said last week, and I'll challenge anybody, if you read any of the books attributed to Paul, you'll see him struggling with this, the idea of God's freedom, and also what does that look like with order right now, because God is a God of order. And in that culture, it was something that was really hard for him to struggle with. You can see that almost like he's kind of conflicted within himself, trying to figure out what does that look like. And I think that's the challenge even today. We talked about we live in a very progressive culture where the church is trying to be very conservative, to be different from the world. And what does it look like to be loved by a God who, Galatians 5:1 says, it is for freedom he set us free, but also who is a God of order. what's that look like in today's society?
Yeah. Also, Jesus, as man, Jesus is head of the church. Man is head of the woman. So we use that scripture too to say, that
Ephesians 5?
women probably submit, to the husband. And later on, you will see where it says submitting one to another in love. So it's not just one without the other, but Christ, even in Matthew 11:28, said that he is. He says, "Come unto me, all you who are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest." He says he's meek and lowly in spirit. And so if the male was to take on the character of Jesus, it would definitely be that of humility and gentleness and nurturing and comfort. And we don't see those types of characteristics in the male culture today.
Yeah, those are not considered masculine traits.
Right.
What's also interesting...
Yeah, to be the head like that, and then having that head to be that to his wife. I don't think you would have a problem with a woman doing anything for you if you were that nurturing and that caring and comforting and yeah.
Well, it's also just really interesting because I've heard people preach that section of scripture a lot, from both perspectives. But it's all like women are told to submit, but men are told to lead like Christ, and then immediately afterwards says loving them the same way Christ loved the church. I'm like, dying for, how is that different than submitting? That's almost like you're submitting to each other, right? Like if I'm willing to die for you, that's in a way me submitting my life to you, right?
He came to be servant of all.
These are the things I think about.
Mm-hmm. That's good stuff, Josh.
But okay, so sorry, this is just fun. I could honestly talk about this all day, but what's the last question, DJ?
So how would you go about uniting with people who don't support the idea of a female head pastor?
Clearly, you said you've encountered those kind of people before. So
do you just box them and get them out of the church, or
delete them on Facebook?
Don't come to our church.
Do we just delete them on Facebook?
We serve a nonviolent Jesus.
Oh, that's right.
Oh man,
He likes to flip tables.
That's a whole nother episode. Nonviolent Jesus, yeah. We had this, when I first started pastoring in Blythewood, we had another church lose their pastor, and so some of their members came over to be with us, and they didn't know me. And one of them said, she was pretty bold, and she reminds me often, and I try to tell her I have feelings, but she's like, I didn't believe in female pastors. And she said, I didn't want to come over here. But just after being here, she said, I never believed in female pastors. And she said, but there was just something that was just so genuine and authentic and just welcoming that I couldn't refuse. And I think, how we do anything, we do everything. So whether it's this particular position or working or, on a daily grind or going to Walmart, we're just gonna love people where they're at, despite if they believe like us or, or willing to accept us. It's not always easy, but again, there's no ego here for this position. We feel called to it, and we feel like that's what the Lord would have us to do. So I agree with you all. When the world sees that the church is one, I think it's possible because Jesus prayed that we would be one. I believe that will be irresistible for them. And I almost hate to say world, like it's them against us. Man, that feels even awful to say. But for my lack of vocabulary, we'll just use that term today.
I guess it's more of a light and darkness.
Light
has no part in darkness, but it doesn't mean it's not in the darkness.
Yeah.
Light can't exist without darkness, and darkness can't exist without light.
Yeah. But us as Jesus followers and non-followers, I think when they see that we are one, and how do we get there? What are we going to leverage? Do we leverage our belief? Like, oh no, we know we're right. Or do we leverage love?
Yeah. Well, and the same grace that we want people to extend to us is the same grace that we have to extend to other people. So grace is not just one-sided. Love is not just one-sided. I had a man, he was a former deacon at a Free Will Baptist church. And he said, all my life I had never believed in women pastors until I met you. And it was just, and he's probably in his 70s. And it's amazing how people have just met us and the genuine love that they feel. It's like they're even rethinking some of the things that they once taught. And so, we're not trying to change people's doctrines or belief, but love has the power to change things that nothing else could. Right. And so, yeah, we're not exempt from people not believing like us too. So that's why I say the same grace that other people demand is the same, that it goes both ways.
Yeah. And actually, it reminds me of my papa, with my dad. My dad was an evangelist whenever he met my mom. And when he preached at their church, he went bowling. And at that time, our church was like adamantly against bowling. But that's just a fun fact. If anybody wanted to know, Church of God of Prophecy used to hate bowling.
Bowling is up there.
Yeah. It actually really did believe that. And my papa was one of those. He hated bowling. I heard but then after he listened to my dad preach and he heard my dad went bowling, he was really conflicted. But then he realized, I could tell God's Spirit's in this.
Do you think Jesus would go bowling?
What would Jesus do? I feel like he'd have a perfect score, probably.
That's just not fair.
But no. But so the thing was, so my grandpa realized he felt God's Spirit, and then allowed him to open up, and bowling became one of his favorite things to do. So that was just a fun fact. But I think it is like that. We heard that when we talked about the camping and tongues talk, and then even last week's episode, I think a lot of times it's if you open up your spirit and you listen to what God's doing, sometimes it'll surprise you. Mm-hmm. And I think anyone who met you guys would know, the Spirit of God is with you guys, and we love you guys and appreciate you guys.
We appreciate that, Josh. Yeah, we don't have an axe to grind. I mean, there's nothing in us that we don't want to prove anything to anybody. In fact, when we introduce ourselves, we normally leave out the part that we're pastors. Yeah. And then they're shocked later on to realize you are pastors, and so that's not a topic of conversation that we just.
I do not invite people to church, not because I'm ashamed of my church, but I don't want them to think I got a gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's also like.
I'm the same way though.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, having been, when I went to college, I went to a secular college first, and I heard from a lot of people what threw them off from churches. And it was stuff like, people wanted me to go to their church and blah. Why do they want me to do this so bad? And it turned them off from people who went to church, or they went to church and the offering plate was passed around and people are begging them for money. They don't know why. Why should I give you my money? Like, they have no idea why things happen the way they happen. Mm-hmm. And then that just spoke to me of like, we don't share the gospel enough. We invite people to church and we don't tell them the good news. We just tell them, hey, come here and you might hear the good news if you give us money. And it's like, what?
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
The good news is behind a paywall.
Yeah. But that this part's for free. We might leave this for part 2, which is coming up. It's going to be on you guys' podcast, the Pastors of a Dying Church. I was about to say Churches of a Dying Pastor.
No, tattoo.
Whoa.
That's a different story.
I don't know.
That'd be an interesting
will
podcast
kill
too,
you.
right?
Tattoo.
Churches of a Dying.
Titanic.
Oh, there we go. Again.
Song.
Yeah.
I'm not
really
here for
excited
a long
that
time.
y'all are going to get to ask us questions about being young men. I'm told
whatever
I'm
you
not
want.
as young as
Yeah, we're excited.
But
I'm
a
the
male.
younger male.
Yeah, his opinion's more valid.
Yeah.
That's what that means. That's not what that means.
Weighted opinions.
Oh man. So one thing we like to do before we wrap up. Well, actually, did you want to? Did you want to use your word?
My word?
Yeah, he likes to use a
Oh,
word.
we can, but well, I'll leave it out. I won't say it this time.
He wants to say ramifications.
Ramifications.
Yeah, but he's trying to figure out how to squeeze that in there. If people do open up their spirit, they pray more, and we're all more open and leverage love, what's something that we could see immediately change in the church? That's his ramification question. I just reworded it.
All right, and say it one more time.
If
I was
people
just thinking
do
how you're
what
going to
we
fit
were
ramification in there.
If we were talking about,
got it.
about how to. Okay, go ahead. Dolores has it.
I think love compels love.
Love compels love.
Yeah.
She's so quotable today.
I think that's the ramification.
Have you
as
always
we
been this
love-
quotable and me not notice?
Dude, yeah.
Yes.
I'm just,
Oh man.
I'm just so chill.
I want a daily devotional book that has quotes from.
No, you don't. I learned it all from Sam,
From
so
Ruth.
really it comes out of her head. I'm just
No.
a mouthpiece.
I can't wait to see it.
I'm just a mouthpiece. I'm the Aaron. She's the Moses.
That'll be the first merch.
I'm
Listen,
the one-liner.
All I'm saying is when you start selling merch for your podcast, Pastors of a Dying Church, the first 2 should just be quotes from you guys, just books of quotes. And
I can't.
One needs to be serious, really good, love compels love, and then the other one needs to just be all the dumb questions we ask. Yeah,
I'm sure we learned it along the way, though.
We can't make a book though, because we got it from somebody.
Yeah, I'm sure we've learned it along the way.
Well, some people think there are no original ideas, so
Really?
We'll
So we can just take it?
Yeah, why not?
Hey, love compels love.
as long as no one can
Delores
find where
Matthews.
the original source,
dang.
then you can't get
Yeah.
copyright.
There you go.
I'm about to make go get a really beautiful picture of a mountain and like do like cursive writing and have love compels love.
Yeah. I'm actually just gonna get
Yeah.
You know
love
they put those
compels
on
love
Instagram?
in Hebrew just tattooed on my chest.
Yeah. Hashtag Delores Matthews.
Yeah.
You can do DM for short. I don't need my whole name.
Ruth.
Hashtag DM.
Yeah. Just get her name tattooed on you as well. So.
That's awful.
Oh man,
Y'all believe in tattoos?
I do.
Joshua has like 7.
Do you really?
I don't have 7.
17.
So the long story was, so you know, I had that bad accident.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of scars on this arm here.
Uh-huh.
Stop that. So I got a tattoo on this side to kind of cover up some of the scars and like incorporate a part of them. But then I realized I was OCD and I only had something on this side. So I was like, I got one on this side too. And that's basically it. They're just really big, so we count them 7.
But they're not symmetrical, right?
No, they are.
There's
very
more or less
They are.
symmetrical.
Yeah, they have almost the exact same design. They're just different tree branches.
Okay.
So this one is the cherry blossom tree, which Japanese culture is for new life. So I have the Greek word from the New Testament of anazao, which is new life. And then this side is oak tree, because I'm from
Whole
Tennessee
church.
and we had a lot of oak trees.
Whole
And then
Whole church.
I have
Yes.
because of whole church. No, it had the
Means
Hebrew
unification.
word for be strong and courageous. So this is like my roots, so to speak.
Hmm.
Yeah, very Jesus-y tattoos.
And there's one on his back.
Yeah. Wait, do y'all not believe?
Why
in
does
tattoos?
TJ
Do
know
y'all
all
believe
your
in
tattoos?
I
That's awesome.
have to see him shirtless a lot.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't like to wear a
we go to
shirt.
Disney and we go to.
Yeah.
You take your shirt off at Disney?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Well,
if you
you-
go to the pool,
We've been here
Oh.
at
we have to
camp.
like.
I
yeah.
somehow
have to
just
see
saw
him.
you hopping on rides with no shirt on. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That happens?
Just
I don't-
wore
if they let
ride
me.
7 dwarfs without a shirt on.
Yeah, I'm like, how did you do that?
Now I got the whole gut too. I
Oh.
still don't think I'd care.
He doesn't really
Oh.
hide them. It's just they're
Well,
in
you're about to be
easily
married.
sideways.
They're
Just don't talk
addictive,
about
aren't
them.
they? Are
What,
they
the
addictive?
gut or the...
The tattoos.
Oh.
I don't like sort of because you're like, man, that was really cool. I like how this one. You know, I bet I could
and
also
you keep
do this.
looking for ideas. Like, oh, that
This is a different podcast. He was about to wrap this thing up.
Yeah, wrap
so.
it up.
maybe we'll talk about that.
I don't have any.
part 2.
Me either.
Yet.
Wait,
TJ.
So how do y'all feel about tattoos?
I don't care.
I don't care.
Okay,
Yeah.
solid, quick answers. We like those.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm too old now.
Yeah, did you wanna wrap this up? Because I'm bad at wrapping. Oh, God moment of the week.
Yeah, we
Yeah, I
have to
can't
do
forget that. So we like to do where we just wrap it up, just tell everybody just something that God did this week for us. It's, whether a challenge, an inspiration, a praise report. I'm really sad and God punched me while I was on the ground and made me
We
cry.
got one
That's
Ooh,
not.
well, that's
together.
exciting.
We hung in there. We didn't
Something
quit.
happened?
Yeah,
Oh.
we didn't quit.
Wait, okay.
You're not going to tell that on this
Is it-
podcast, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
recorded.
it's okay if we'll do
Oh.
ours first because y'all sound like a lot better than what ours usually are.
Okay.
So last time his was a praise report about having a really big cup. So
Yeah, I usually
we want
I try
to
go
save the
first.
good one last. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to go ahead?
My God moment of the week was, well, we did not plan today well. We ate breakfast, and it was bad.
Yeah.
There were eggs and cheese, but it really just felt like wet sand in our mouth.
What happened was I remember him saying he liked cheese in his scrambled eggs. So I was like, oh, well, I love TJ, so I'll do extra cheese. And it ended up being mostly cheese. And then that was bad.
That wouldn't have been bad. Something else had to happen.
I burned the butter.
Because there was no egg texture or taste.
He cooked it in
Burnt
rocks.
cheese.
It was like eating really small gravel.
Oh.
How was that your
Gravel in
God
your mouth.
moment?
It's not.
How does
What's it?
That's the start. We didn't
Okay.
plan today out very well, obviously. So we wasted a lot of time by doing nothing. So by the time-
Sometimes doing nothing leads to
Leads to
something.
Piglet. No,
I-
Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh.
I mean, I
Christopher
knew it was from that movie.
Man,
It
we
just
could
had
have
like
taken credit.
It has such a good Winnie the Pooh feel. I have
my God.
one of my favorite books
Right?
on. I like to read about other religions just so I'm knowledgeable.
What?
Yeah, it's interesting.
What other
One of my
religion?
favorites
Ooh.
is called The Tao of Pooh and explains what Taoism is through the lens of Winnie the Pooh, and that's one of my favorite books.
So you're not afraid that you? No, never mind.
Yeah.
Please
Oh, go
finish your
ahead.
story. No.
He is not afraid.
Fearless.
But
I have,
we obviously didn't plan this out very well, so we didn't build time to eat into this trip. But when we got here, you guys
was
had
food.
food. So,
Aww.
it was nice. I think
Worked out.
that's
Yay.
The
my
praise
job.
report that God will provide.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God will provide.
Hallelujah.
Ram in
We
the
don't-
bush, man. A ram
Always a
in the
ram
bush.
and
I usually don't plan for things, so God provides a lot.
That's good.
yes, he does.
Mine
Thank you,
technically was last week, but it's been since the last podcast, so it's.
Just don't tell us it was last week.
Well, it wasn't last week. Me and my fiance went to check out the venue in Duke, which we definitely can't use. Turns out you have to be a student or something
For
use
their wedding.
chapel. Yeah, but we were looking at it for the venue, and it was just so interesting to just kind of like walk around the chapel and see not only how big and how grand it was, but all the different points, all the different columns were arrows pointing up because it was Gothic architecture, and that was the entire point of Gothic architecture. And they had the stained glass all throughout the church, and each one told a different story from the Bible and all this different stuff. And I sat there thinking about how so many different people worship God in so many different ways. I was like, man, some guy built this building, and the entire time was thinking, how can I point to God better? And like the way he built the building was like, okay, what way will this cause people to look up? And some guy made this stained glass thinking, how can I best tell the stories of the Bible so that I can give some glory to my God? And it was like every little part of that building, someone had something to do with worshiping God and pointing towards him. And I just thought that was such a cool thing. As I was like, man, sometimes I forget all the different ways that, I don't feel like I do that. Like, I don't think in my life I sit down and go, man, how could I do what I'm doing right now in such a way that it points to God better? And the detail that went into that really spoke to me. I thought that was crazy.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so ours was together.
Still in a combined one?
Yeah, we're doing a combined one that we had
No,
decisions
y'all have to say
to
it
make.
in sync.
Yeah,
Say it in sync.
we can't.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
They didn't
I was
practice
going
that.
to try.
That'll be too short,
but
but
she's
too
like-
long. All right, go ahead.
No.
We had I will say a word and then you say the next one. See if we can get it.
Okay.
We
Had
a
God moment.
What'd we have?
Yeah.
this week.
When
We
did not.
quit.
There you go.
That's it.
Did not quit what?
What'd you think? What did you not quit?
Whatever.
I don't know a word for it.
Decision
Yeah, decision.
we were going to make. So we can't go into all details, but there were, decisions on her end she was going to make, decisions on my end we had to make. And then we were really neutral, but the Lord changed the whole thing around where we didn't even have to make those decisions. So that was
they
a
were hard
definite
decisions.
big
Yeah,
God
difficult.
moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
God
Yeah.
by-stepped it for you.
And I just want to say too, I saw God yesterday in a dying cancer patient. And I know that's like, oh, what? You're describing buildings God provided, and he obviously didn't let us give up. But I think sometimes we omit him even in the suffering. And so, there's like a friend of mine, she's found out she has cancer, and immediately like hospice is stepping in and that kind of stuff. And sat at the edge of the couch, just knowing that God is faithful. And, you talk about love, compelling love, and it built us towards love. And, but I think suffering, we're not going to really understand sometimes the full scope of who God is and who he is for us unless we do suffer. And so I for whatever reason, this is her deal, but yet the family is there, and we got to go and just minister with our presence, Lance and I, and
God, I love Lance.
Oh, don't you? He's just
Hopefully we have him on here one day.
he's incredible.
It was a
Yeah.
Titanic moment.
Let's just go. Let's just go see
There's
that.
See,
back to the
don't pay-
Titanic.
I-
Here we go. Man,
The whole
That's
Titanic.
it. But for real, like we forget
yeah.
that he's in those moments too.
one of the
You know?
most what is it? One of the most spiritually effectual. I don't know. I'm trying to say spiritual and effective at the same time,
Mhm.
and I
That
just can't think
sounds
of a good word.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Spirifectual. One of the most spirifectual books I've read in the last couple years was, of course, C.S. Lewis, but it's The Problem with Pain. It was right after his wife died, and he gets so raw, and he's so good with words, just describing how he felt, that it was like, oh man. And it's like all but the last few pages is just you're reading this going, man, I feel like this man who has already passed took my heart out, shredded it into little pieces. Why on earth am I reading this? And then the last few pages, he's like, but here's what God does with that. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
wow. And it's a beautiful book.
He's in the suffering
I'll
as well.
drop Amazon
Yeah.
link to that
Yeah.
and then show notes too.
So
That's
the problem
crazy.
with pain.
Yeah, the
Oh,
problem
yeah.
with pain. Yeah, it's really fun if you can read that and no, I'm talking about A Grief Observed. The Problem of Pain is the other one. You read those
Okay.
together, it's really cool. Problem of Pain is where he's like intellectually thinking through what the point of pain is, and he's like really cold and intellectual. Then A Grief Observed is him actually dealing with it, and it's like, wow, this was the same person. Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's for another podcast. I
that
could
it?
spend another
Yeah,
hour
you
on
can
that.
have those two traits
Yeah,
in
we-
one person.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can.
y'all want to spend another hour out of that?
No.
All right.
You
So
can talk about C.S. Lewis all you want.
I really could. I'll have my own C.S. Lewis podcast next.
Yeah. It will be
I'm
your
not.
own because
I
I
won't do
won't
that.
listen to you talk about C.S. Lewis for that long.
I could. All right. Do you want to
All
wrap
right,
us up?
so that'll be the end of our half of this podcast. You'll have to follow Pastors of a Dying Church to hear the rest.
It's kind of like I talked about it earlier. Like when Disney Channel used to do That's So Raven, Sweet Life, and that third show we can't think of because it wasn't as good, where like all of the groups were on each episode.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you're only hearing part of it. You want to hear the rest? You got to watch That's So Raven.
About like the Flash and Green Arrow, right?
Ooh, yeah, those are good too. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that too.
Yeah.
Or
Supergirl.
yeah, ooh, Supergirl.
Yeah, she's on
You know,
there
I like the
sometime.
first season. I didn't like it after that.
Uh,
Anyway,
Yet to watch. I probably won't. But follow us on Facebook, please. Instagram. Can you tell them about the Patreon?
yeah. If y'all
Patreon.
follow us on Patreon, we have until the 21st, or I'll say until the podcast that releases with Tim Coulter. I don't know exactly when that is. So that's the beginning of next month. Until then, if you join us on Patreon and support us, you are entered in for a chance to win a Kindle Fire 7 with Francis Chan's book, Letters of a Dying Church, on that as well. And it helps us with the mic and all that other really cool stuff that we need, and to be able to do more free giveaways because we want to keep our followers as involved as possible, reading the comments and feedback and everything like that. It's really important to us that you guys are part of this. I talk a lot about the priesthood of all believers, but with the podcast, it's hard to do that, but we want to do our best to communicate with you guys. And also, most of the way we communicate is through Patreon. We have our people on there we send letters to and do daily devotionals and a lot
Email
of stuff
and-
just to try and keep everybody involved.
They get to hear us talk about random garbage. Don't you want to hear us talk about random garbage?
Yeah, we do a reflections like every week, and this coming week is going to be us talking about new music that came out. Judah and the Lion released an album, and I just really like it.
Not even a lot of new music.
Just like a handful of
just like
songs. We're like, we
15
could talk
different
about this
songs
for
that
like
we
15
talk
minutes.
Please leave a comment on our podcast on iTunes or Google Play.
That helps people see it, and also share it on your social media. That helps a lot, like I mentioned at the beginning of this.
Force everyone you know to listen to this,
Yeah, just strap people down and make them listen.
and then force them to follow it.
Yeah.
If
Click it.
you have a God moment of the week you think we should read, send us an email. We're the whole church.
Yeah,
at
the whole church
Gmail.
at Gmail. Yeah. Not the whole church podcast at Gmail, just the whole church at Gmail.
And some future guests. Who do we have?
We have Tim Coulter coming up in like 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
As the General Presbytery of the Church of God of Prophecy in North America. We're really excited to have him on. Next week, I think we're going to have Brother Baker and Dr. Smith. Brother Baker was our old state overseer, and Dr. Smith is a really smart guy. Yeah.
Eventually, we're going to track down Chucky Chandler, and we're going to force him to sit down and talk to us for like 30 minutes.
We do have Donald Whitney, one of my favorite authors, is going to be at the end of the summer, so that's really exciting.
And, of course, Francis Chan at the end of Season 1.
He just doesn't know it yet.
Yeah. But that's it for our half of the podcast.
Yeah. Tune in to Pastors of a Dying Church for the rest.
Yeah.